Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thanks again for taking some time out of your day and listening to this podcast, which is designed to try and help dads and even busy parents hopefully reclaim their strength, athleticism, and confidence, and give you a little bit of an insight into my life and my struggles that I have had as a dad. I know everyone's experience as a parent is extremely unique, and whenever anyone is giving out advice, context is needed. I've done a whole bunch of episodes on that over the last few weeks, but hopefully I'm able to provide you with some insight and hopefully some information that you can take away and you can action to hopefully move yourself into the direction that you want to go. So before I get into the topic for this week's show, if you could please just make sure wherever you're listening or watching this on, that you are either subscribed or you've liked or followed us on whatever platform that is. We've got it all over the place. So on all the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, and all the good ones there. We have video versions of this on YouTube and Facebook. And then also we are on the socials as well. Not every single one of them, but we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and we are on TikTok now as well, which is something I am trialing out, which is something that is super uncomfortable for me. Those of you that have followed me for a while know that social media is not my strong suit. It is something I am working more and more to get better at. And that really ties into what I wanted to go on about today and the topic that I want to cover off. And it's repetition, because I'm coming at this from a couple of different angles. Obviously, I've just mentioned the social media thing, and it's something that I'm becoming more comfortable with the more I do. But it also revolves around training. So we're also going through a phase at the moment where I'm releasing a free 8-week program. And one of the things, and there was a question from a dad who is doing the program at the moment, because the first movement on each week, and I'll tell you right now, spoiler alert for the next 6 weeks, the first movement every week is going to be a back squat. Because for the first 8 weeks, we're trying to build the foundation. It's one movement that is going to be a constant, and then we are going to repeat a whole bunch of other movements that we do over this first 3 to 4 week period in the next 3 to 4 week period. And the reason for that is when it comes to training, like, repetition is important. I've gone through if we're using the program as an example, right? I've gone through who the program's designed for. If you're unsure and you're joining us for the first time and maybe you're trying to jump into the program, go back and listen to the episode that I did a few weeks ago where I explain in a little bit more detail who it's for, and my philosophies around coaching and training as it pertains to physical capabilities, and why context is important, and why I generally lean towards doing a more individualized program for people. But repetition is important. Repetition is important, especially in training, but also when we're trying to obtain a skill in life. And in order to get good at something, we have to do reps at it. Like, we have to get more proficient at it. And there are going to be things in life where we do something for the first time and we do pretty well at it. Like, we're more predisposed to being able to do that on a higher level, whether that be movement base, or it be from an intellectual point of view, or it be any other skill base. But the bottom line is, you're never going to really start something and the first time you do it, or the second time you do it, or for some of us even the 10th or 20th or 30th time we do it, we're never going to be really good at it. Like, it's all about acquiring that skill and getting better at the skill. And the only way for a lot of things you can get better at that is to do more repetitions. Now, I can go down the path of coaching is a good way to get better at things faster, which it is, because rather than you having to go trial and error with a lot of things, you can get direct feedback on what you need to improve. But then in order to improve that, you have to take the coaching on board, and then you have to then go and you have to reapply that, and you have to try that. And for a lot of us, when we reapply that coaching piece, it's still not going to be perfect. There's still going to be little nuances that we need to change, and we need to tweak, and we need to move a little bit further in the direction to try and get better at it. And it's this constant evolution where in order to get proficient at something, whether it be a movement or a skill, I mentioned earlier on in the podcast about me and social media. I'm still pretty shit at it, to be fair. Like, it's something that I'm working to get better on, but it's the same as coaching, right? And it's the same as communication, and it's the same as talking. I'm naturally an introverted person, so to go into a profession where I was coaching groups, it was a big stretch for me. It was really uncomfortable. And now it's almost second nature. But that's come from 15 years of repetition, of refining communication and working with people, but putting myself in that situation where I'm able to get better at it. So if we then loop this back to the training program, there's a reason why in an 8-week program, an initial 8-week program, and this program is meant for a more beginner lifter, for somebody who maybe hasn't trained in a while. We need to make sure that we're redoing movements and we're getting those repetitions in order to make us technically proficient at that particular lift. And if we're not doing those repetitions and we're not revisiting those movements, we're not going to see any form of progression in a short period of time. Now, I've picked the back squat in the programming. I think the back squat's a very powerful movement. Now, should everybody be doing it? No. Again, if you're unsure on what my thoughts around that, I did a podcast on context 2 weeks ago, but this is just what I've done for this general program, right? So every week, for the next 8 weeks, we're going to start off doing the back squat. Now we're going to superset that with different movements and things like that to try and maximize our time, to try and give us a little bit of variety. But that back squat is going to be the core foundation to begin to start off every week. And the reason for that is I think it's a very powerful movement. I think it's something that everybody should try and get proficient at. And it also allows us to build overall body strength and use use a progressive overload technique in order to try and see some form of great results in a very short period, which is 8 weeks. Now, some people will look at 8 weeks and go, well, that isn't actually a short period. Like, a short period is 1 or 2 weeks. But when it comes to training, when it comes to lifestyle, and when it comes to your overall health, 8 weeks over the course of a lifetime is not very long at all. So a couple of points that I've written down as it pertains to repetition. Number one, and something I've already rehashed over, is in order to get good at something, you have to do repetition, and you have to do more repetition. It allows you to build proficiency. If it's a movement, you're able to build technical proficiency, which means you will see results. And for most people, when it comes to training, and it comes to compound lifts like a back squat or a deadlift or a bench press, the results is the weight on the bar. Like, am I getting stronger at the lift? And it's a very tangible metric, right? Like, am I adding more weight to the lift? Yes or no? And you can get stronger at a lift just by getting more technically proficient at the lift. So if you start doing it and you feel uncomfortable doing it, the more you can do of it, and now I'm not talking about more in one session. It's a cumulative effect over time, because there's going to be a point of diminishing returns when you do a lot of repetitions in a single session, right? But if we can build that up, say over an 8-week period like we're trying to do, by the end of the 8 weeks, if you're doing a 5x5 and a progressive overload technique like we're doing, you're going to see a pretty good jump in that particular metric and that particular strength number. Now, the other thing is, with anything you do, you don't ever start good at something, especially when it's brand new, whether it's lifting, whether it's the social media piece like I'm talking about. Now, there are going to be things that you are going to be more naturally inclined to start off better at, whether it is something physical, something mental. You may have a higher starting point that potentially somebody else, that is due to your background, your training history, your work history, like other things that you've done in the past. These are all going to factor into your starting point. But it also means that the ceiling for two people may be exactly the same. It just might take more repetitions for one person to get there because they have that lower starting point. But the underlying thing is doing the repetitions in order to get good at it, in order to get proficient at it. More reps allows us greater technical proficiency. So it doesn't matter whether it is the back squat or it is one of those lifts with training, or it is something like a skill that we're trying to acquire to level up in our business, whether it's getting better at sales, whether it's getting better at communication, whether it's getting better at social media posts, the more we do of it, the more technically proficient we're going to become at it, the quicker we're going to be able to complete that particular task, and hopefully the better result we're going to be able to get from it, because it allows us to build confidence and it allows us to build a nice strong base. And then once we've built that base and once we've built that confidence around the movement, then we can start to get a little bit more adventurous with what we do. So when it comes to training, it may mean that once we've built that base with the back squat over a 6-month, 12-month period, then we can start to explore other options. Maybe we can put a little bit more variety in the program because we've built the base around that movement or a couple of different movements, rather than trying to master 100 different things in our first 8 weeks. We're going to focus on mastering a few things, and we're going to do a good amount of repetitions with those to not only get us technically proficient with them, but to also drive adaptation within those particular movements so that we can see results. And then by building that base, then what we're able to do, we're able to build on that with complexity. Okay, and by doing that, we're able to firstly maintain a strong, healthy balance with our training. When we see results, we're going to be more motivated to continue to take those actions, because repetition can be boring. Doing the same thing over and over and over again for a lot of people, especially if you have like a short attention span, can be super boring. And when it comes to training, I think sometimes that's on the coach to keep you engaged, because maybe doing a back squat every week isn't the thing to do, but there are other things we can do within that to try and keep you engaged, but still try and build that technical proficiency. But it can be boring. But if you're seeing results, a lot of us are going to be more inclined to do the boring work if we're seeing some results that we want to get. And the thing is, if we chop and change too quickly, we're not going to get good at anything in a short period of time. If you only do something for a week or two and then you throw it in the too hard basket and you don't get the repetitions to get technically proficient at it, of course you're going to feel like you suck at it, because you're in that beginner stage of learning something. But you need to keep doing those repetitions and that movement in order to get technically proficient at it, and changing and jumping around won't get us better at anything in a decent period of time. And let's revert back to training. Let's say we did a different movement every week for this 8-week period, and we only revisited those movements. Let's say we didn't revisit any movements at all over the 8-week period. Well, there's going to be no level of technical proficiency within any of those movements if you're an absolute beginner. There just won't be. And if we kept that same cycle going, and we were looking at the back squat, where we only did the back squat, say, for example, once every 8 weeks, it may take you years to actually feel comfortable with that and actually see some level of progression and actually drive that progression forward. Whereas if we pick a few things that we want to focus on in the short term, that first 8 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, and we really hone in on getting good at those, then after that initial period, when we have those repetitions, we have that technical proficiency, and we have that really wide base, then we can start to get a little bit more jiggy with the program, and we can start to offer a little bit more variety. And we can do that in a way where you're able to actually look at a wider array of things because you've built that base, and you can actually get a lot more variety by just spending that first period of time, whether it's 6 months or 12 months, really getting good at some core movements and a core focus so that you can broaden those horizons later on. Whereas I think a lot of people, when it comes to training, what they want is they want variety. And then by getting that variety, they're not building a nice strong base. And then by not building that base, that can lead down the path of causing injuries. It can lead down the path of, while you're going to potentially find some more enjoyment out of getting a wide array of things, I think the byproduct of that is, because you're not going to see some results or you're not going to feel like you're seeing results because the approach is so wide and so scattergun that you're not really able to focus in on what am I trying to achieve with this. You're going to feel a little bit defeated because the movements that you then revisit, there is no level of technical proficiency because you're not moving them forward because you are not getting the repetitions. And by getting more reps and then incrementally increasing the amount of weight on the bar, the amount of difficulty that you're putting yourself under, the amount of stress that you're putting yourself under, so that progressive overload technique that we're using within our 8-week program, when you look at your starting point from week 1 and your finishing point at week 8, there has been progression. Okay, and we have introduced additional stress into the movement, into the situation that has driven that progression. And we've done it in a way where it hasn't completely overloaded you, and you've been able to build a base so that then you can start to move on to something a little bit more difficult. And I think a lot of people don't want to do the reps on the front end. They want the complexity on the front end without putting in the work. And what that leads to on the back end is it leads to confusion. It leads to not enjoying it. And most importantly, it leads to you not getting results because you haven't built the base. And for lack of a better term, you haven't earned the right for complexity. I'm going to just revert straight back to training because a lot of people, they want the complexity off the gate because the other stuff is quote unquote boring. But unfortunately, when it comes to training, you have to earn the right for complexity. And you earn the right by doing the repetitions on the simpler stuff and by building that base. And if you build that base wide enough, then the sky is the limit with how complex you can start to make things. But if you only have a short base and a narrow base and you try and make that tower too high, the tower's going to topple over, whether that be injury, whether that be mentally, or whatever limiting factor is going to stop that tower from getting as high as it needs to be. If you haven't spent the time building that base, it will fall over at some point. Now, some people are more mentally resilient or more physically resilient and are going to be able to get further, but at some point it will happen. So the biggest thing when it comes to repetition, whether it be within training, whether it be with acquiring a skill, you have to go through the boring stuff and you have to put in the repetition because that is going to help you stack little wins and it is going to help you build confidence. And that, in turn, will help you drive progression. And I think when it comes to training, when it comes to acquiring a new skill, the thing that we're all after is progression. We're all after results. Progression is going to give us some results. So by doing the repetitions and focusing on those daily actions and focusing on just doing the 5x5 each week and adding 2.5 kilos to it, and then rather than focusing on the weight on the bar or potentially like how boring it can feel at times, focus on the fact that you've achieved something by doing it. You are getting more technically proficient at whatever it is that you're doing by doing more repetition of it and more good repetition. That's the other thing, and I won't go down that rabbit hole right now, but there is a saying that practice makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect. The old saying, practice makes perfect, isn't necessarily correct. You need to make sure that you are moving. If we're talking about movement, you're moving well. You are doing good repetitions, because if you're doing those good repetitions and you're stacking those little wins, that's going to help you build confidence and it's going to help you progress, which again is going to help you drive results. So keep doing the reps. The big thing that everyone wants to be so quick to change the stress that we're putting ourselves under without doing the reps. And I'm guilty of this too. Trust me. Like I'm sometimes always looking for that next shiny object, right? Like we're trying to look for that quick fix or that quick pill because we need to have something happen now. It's not something that I've been guilty of in training. I'm going to be completely open and honest. It's been something I have been guilty of within business, right? Like where I really want that quick result, like that quick financial return, and I go to like the next shiny object thinking that, and it all comes down to the same thing. Most things will work if you put in the time and you put in the effort and you do the repetition to get good at it, the good repetition to get good at it. because that's going to allow you to stack those wins, build those confidence, and drive progression. And if you jump around too quickly, you will never get good at something in a short period of time. So stack the wins, do the reps, build that confidence, and that, in turn, my friends, will help you hopefully get the results that you're after and the results that you're looking for. So thanks for listening to me. Hopefully you got something out of that. We're on the 20-minute side again. That's 2 20-minute podcasts in a row. I try and keep these under 15 minutes, but I kind of got on a bit of a roll there, which hopefully is of some benefit to you. But stay with it. Like, stay the course. If you're invested in a coach, if you're following our program, like, stay with it. Do the repetitions, but do it for a good period of time. Like, don't go looking for a quick fix and go looking to chop and change every week or two, because that secret squirrel shit as it comes to training and trying to build every program in and trying to do everything and not focusing on getting good at, one or two things is only going to lead to trouble at some point. You need to earn the right for complexity, and you need to earn the right to do other things, do complicated things. So spend the time on the simple stuff, do the repetitions. That's going to help move you forward. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you want to have a chat, link in the show notes, link in the video notes to jump on and book a chat with me. Make sure you've added yourself to the Facebook group if you are doing our 8-week program. So thanks again. We'll see you next week. Bye.